By the winter of 1942, the war in the East had already consumed millions of lives. Entire armies had vanished into forests, frozen plains, and mass graves without names. Cities had been reduced to rubble. Rivers ran black with oil and blood. Yet even as the scale of destruction grew beyond comprehension, orders continued to arrive demanding the impossible. Hold, advance, do not retreat. Inside a ruined city on the Volga River, one man understood something that few were willing to admit. The war was already lost. And still, he fought. His name was Friedrich Paulus, commander of Germany's Sixth Army, and the battlefield where this realization became unavoidable was Stalingrad. Paulus was not a fanatical ideologue. He was not a reckless gambler or a charismatic battlefield legend. He was a staff officer by training, methodical, cautious, deeply aware of logistics, supply lines, and limitations. He believed in plans, in preparation, in feasibility, which is precisely why he knew, earlier than most, that Stalingrad could not be won. The German summer offensive of 1942 had begun with ambition bordering on desperation. Germany had failed to defeat Britain. The Eastern Campaign had dragged on far longer than planned. Resources were strained, fuel was scarce, and manpower losses were irreplaceable. The solution, as Germany's leadership saw it, was a decisive blow. The Southern Soviet Union held what Germany needed most: oil. The Caucasus fields represented survival. Stalingrad, a major industrial city and transportation hub, stood in the way. Taking it would sever Soviet supply routes and deliver a symbolic victory of enormous propaganda value. Paulus was ordered east. From the beginning, he recognized the danger. The Sixth Army was strong on paper, but stretched thin across vast distances. Supply lines ran hundreds of miles. Fuel and ammunition arrived inconsistently. Replacement troops lacked training. Winter equipment was inadequate. Still, the advance continued. By late summer, German forces reached Stalingrad. What followed was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was a slow descent into annihilation. The city became a maze of ruins where maps meant nothing and front lines shifted by meters instead of miles. Fighting took place in basements, stairwells, factories, and sewers. Buildings changed hands multiple times a day. Soldiers lived underground like hunted animals. The city devoured divisions. Paulus watched casualty reports climb while gains shrank. He requested permission to withdraw to more defensible positions. The answer was no. Hold the city. He requested permission to shorten lines, to pull back vulnerable flanks held by Allied units poorly equipped for winter combat. The answer was no. Hold the city. By November, Soviet forces launched a massive counteroffensive. Instead of attacking the German corps directly, they struck the weaker flanks. The encirclement was swift and devastating. Within days, the Sixth Army was surrounded. Paulus understood immediately what this meant. No breakout plan existed. Fuel reserves were insufficient for a coordinated escape. Air supply, even under ideal conditions, could not sustain an army of hundreds of thousands. Winter temperatures plunged, food ran out, ammunition dwindled. He sent reports explaining the reality. They were ignored. The response from above was absolute. The army would be supplied by air and would hold its position until relieved. Paulus knew this was fantasy. Aircraft could not deliver enough supplies. Weather grounded flights. Soviet anti-aircraft fire destroyed transport planes at alarming rates. Soldiers received rations measured in days, then in hours. Frostbite claimed limbs faster than bullets. Disease spread. Horses were slaughtered for meat. Paulus continued to issue orders not because he believed in victory, but because command demanded it. Each day, he signed reports he knew described a doomed force. Each night, he reviewed maps that no longer reflected reality. The Sixth Army ceased to function as an army. It became a trapped population slowly starving under artillery fire. Paulus sent one final request to break out. the answer was no. Then came the final order. He was promoted to field marshal. In German military tradition, no field marshal had ever surrendered. The implication was clear: die. Paulus understood the message. He also understood that continued resistance would accomplish nothing but unnecessary death. His soldiers were freezing, starving, and dying by the thousands. Relief was impossible. The war, he now knew with certainty, could not be won. Germany lacked the resources. The Soviet Union was not collapsing. The Allies were growing stronger. The strategic balance had already shifted. Stalingrad was not an isolated disaster. It was a symptom. On January 31, 1943, Paulus surrendered. He did not shoot himself. He did not order a final suicidal assault. He chose survival for what remained of his men. It was an act viewed by many as betrayal. Others saw it as humanity. History would judge it as inevitable. The Sixth Army was destroyed. Nearly 300,000 men were killed, wounded, or captured. Germany never recovered from the loss. Paulus spent the rest of the war in captivity. Over time, he became openly critical of the leadership that had sacrificed his army for ideology and pride. He testified after the war not to excuse himself, but to explain how obedience had overridden reason. His tragedy was not cowardice. It was clarity. He saw the end coming and could not stop it. Paulus was not the only commander trapped in this position. Across the collapsing fronts of the war, officers faced the same impossible choice: obey orders that guaranteed destruction or defy them and be branded traitors. Most obeyed, some broke. Few survived. The war demanded loyalty even when loyalty served no purpose. It rewarded obedience even when obedience destroyed armies. It punished realism as defeatism. Paulus fought on not because he believed, but because the system left no room for disbelief. By the time the war ended, millions more would die after the outcome was already clear. Battles would be fought without strategic meaning. Cities would be defended with no hope of relief. Soldiers would be ordered to sacrifice themselves for a future that no longer existed. The commander who knew the war was lost did not change history, but his story reveals something darker. Wars do not always continue because victory is possible. Sometimes they continue because stopping is unthinkable. Paulus understood the truth before most, and still he fought.